Hello, everyone. Yeah, so this is Second Take. This is a podcast project between myself, Atif Ahmad, and Raj Ghadiali. We're two friends. We just love talking about sports. Um, and what else better time to start a sport podcast in NFL playoff season? We got some great games coming up. But before we get into that, I'm going to let Raj introduce himself, say whatever he wants to go, and then we'll get right into the action. Raj?
Yeah, I mean it's exciting, to talk about playoffs. I mean, every all 32 teams they want to be in the playoffs. So I mean, this is the time to talk about it. Let's get into it.
Yeah. And to start off about the playoffs, I think Al Michaels said something really good after the Packer Dallas game, and he said that regardless of how other sports, American sports go, NFL playoffs is something special. There are 32 teams, as you just said, and only 12 make it. It's not like 12 out of 32. It's selective than like basketball. Basketball, 8 out of every division, and from hockey and other sports too. It's a little. I shouldn't use the word easier, but it's more tenable and more possible for you to make playoffs. So in football, it's really, really difficult. So first of all, we just want to give a shout out to all the teams from the AFC and the NFC that made it. Yeah. So Raj, what do you want to start with, the AFC or the NFC? Which one do you think we should start with?
I think NFC is the more interesting one. So I think we should start with AFC and kind of finish on a high note. But
Yeah.
yeah, AFC still has some good games, but NFC just seems stacked with good teams and good quarterbacks as opposed to AFC. So let's start with AFC first.
Agreed. So let's, as Rod says, I agree with him on the AFC part. So let's start off with the Saturday games. We're gonna go as they're aired. So the first game is on January 7th. It's going to be, I think, on ESPN and ABC. It's the Oakland Raiders and the Houston Texans. Oakland finished the season 12-4, second in the AFC West. The Houston Texans finished 9-7, and they finished the top of the AFC South. Raj, what do you think about this matchup?
Well, I mean, first of all, the biggest thing is two quarterbacks are missing. I mean, actually, well, Tom Savage was a starter. I mean, the biggest storyline is Derek Carr. That's the season he had. I think this is his third year, yeah. And
Yeah, third year.
he's been really good. I mean, he's been getting better each season, and that's not an easy division to play in, as we all know. It's just, Chiefs are hot. Even Denver for the first half of the season was looking pretty good. So it's a lot of credit goes to Derek Carr, but unfortunately he's not in the playoffs. So we're gonna see a rather dull matchup between two dull quarterbacks. But on the brighter side, the Texans defense definitely looks like they can handle being in the playoffs. They've been in playoffs last year, didn't go really well for them, but I think this is a rather easy matchup for them. And Raiders are not gonna do too much, I think, with Connor Cook or Matt McGloin at the helm. So,
Mhm.
yeah, I think Texans got a really good shot, and both teams. It's going to be a defensive battle, I think, and I think Texans are just a better defensive team.
Yeah, and I was reading Pro Football Focus the other day, and it said that AJ Bowie, one of the Texans corners, had a very high amount of pass breakups, 12 or 14 or something, which is really really high, which is almost as much as Janoris Jenkins had, and we all know he had a Pro Bowl and possibly even an All Pro year, So the Texans secondary, it's no joke. I think they've done a great job. I forget the Texans defensive coordinator. He deserves a lot of credit. I think the offense really, really struggled. DeAndre Hopkins didn't get going. Will Fuller had a good start. He definitely couldn't carry it on. But the one thing is that the Texans are getting Lamar Miller back. I think he had a finger or some injury, so I think that Texans might depend a lot on Lamar Miller because, as you said, it's going to be a defensive battle. But Oakland's defense, run defense especially, they aren't that good. They have good pass rush in Bruce Irvin and Khalil Mack, and we might see Brock Osweiler get sacked and hit quite a bit. But I also agree. I think the Texans are going to have just enough, and they're going to take the first
Well,
game. And go ahead.
no, I mean, if we're being real honest, I think what Raiders are hoping for is Osweiler to just be himself. And I mean, if the Raiders are able to pull this game out, then that just means that Osweiler basically was the MVP for them. I believe that because Osweiler he's one of those quarterbacks that this whole season he hasn't been able to do what the expectation was, and he's just the biggest stat is he turns the ball over. I mean, when you have a quarterback that turns the ball over all the time, you know, the other defense doesn't have to do too much other than just play sound. And I think Raiders can maybe hold on to this game by even just playing sound. I don't think they have to do too much. They don't have to give him like different looks and stuff like that. He's not that savvy of a quarterback. He hasn't been in the league for too long. I think what they have to do is play coverage well and just clog and cover, basically. They just have to make sure that he doesn't have a lot of open lanes. And I think that should, if Texans defense does anything out of the ordinary, and just does extremely well. I mean, they've been doing really well, but they haven't really blown anyone away. And if they were to do that this game, then Texans have a real shot. But I think with Osweiler playing, he just can't, give it to Texans, even though the Raiders might be playing with their third string. You just can't hand the game over to Texans because, it's a lot more likely that Osweiler will turn the game over to them. So, I think for that reason, Osweiler being the quarterback, I think Raiders have a real chance.
Yeah, and I think on offense, the key is Lamar Miller. If Lamar Miller, is stuffed in the first two downs, and we know Bill O'Brien loves to run the ball, and it's those third and long situations for Brock Osweiler. He doesn't do well in first and longs, and how is he going to get the conversion that they need in third and long? Lamar Miller, I just think that he's going to be a huge factor in this game, and if the Raiders are able to stop him, I think that's huge. Brock Osweiler, unfortunately, and you got to feel for DeAndre Hopkins a little bit. Like last year against the Chiefs too, when they were getting decimated, DeAndre Hopkins, he was trying his best, but unfortunately, Brian Hoyer last year completely, threw a stinker that game. And Brock Osweiler, it looks like it's going to be deja vu for the Texans on offense. But at the same time, I really feel that, we aren't talking enough about Connor Cook. Connor Cook, he's a rookie. He didn't look particularly well, in my opinion, against the Broncos. And the last time he played a playoff game, albeit in college against Alabama, they got destroyed. But I really think it's going to come down to the running game, and I think the Raiders have the better offensive line. They have a better running back committee. They have Rashard. They have Latavius Murray, and they have I think DeAndre Washington or someone. I'm not sure who the third one is, but I think the running game is going to be absolutely crucial in this game, and whoever can stop the run of the other team probably will get the W. It's a tough one. I think very narrowly I'm going to go with the Texans because of home field advantage, and I think their defense might just come up. If Derek Carr played, there is no question, in my opinion. So who are you picking, Raj?
I mean, I agree. I'm picking the Texans, but it's not by large margin. It's just I just trust the fact that Texas defense will be able to shut down, or not shut down, but at least limit Connor Cook or Matt McGloin. I mean, there hasn't been a lot of tape on Connor Cook, but it's a road game. It's his first start if he does start, and it's a playoff game. I mean, and Texans are playing at home, so you got the crowd going, and I don't think a rookie quarterback, into playoffs, and I don't think he knows a lot of playbook either. So it just looks to be going Texans' way, and I think only Texans can hurt themselves by turning the ball over. But yeah, for now, I'll go with Texans. I think they'll win by a touchdown or two, maybe.
Yeah, I think I also agree with that. We're gonna a much more offensively minded game in the Dolphins at the Steelers, and this, in my opinion, this is a regular season rematch. We all know what happened in the regular season with the Dolphins getting a win at Miami. Ben Roethlisberger, I think he got hurt that game, and I think Landry Jones or someone, I think it was Landry Jones who filled in, and Le'Veon Bell, I think, got stuffed in that game. He didn't get too many yards. That game in the first game at Baltimore was where Le'Veon Bell really didn't do that well. This game is going to be on the 8th of January, 1:05 p.m. at CBS. And I think, it's stark contrast between what we're going to see, because I think both teams aren't going to rely on their defense. If you look at the Steelers, the Steelers obviously have, Ryan Shazier, they have Mike Mitchell and, Stephon Tuitt, who have really come across in the last couple of weeks, coming really clutch for the Steelers. And for Miami, they have Sue and Rashad Jones, a really good safety. But this game isn't going to be predicated on defense. You have two great running backs, Jay Ajayi, who's had a great year, Pro Bowl year, Le'Veon Bell, who arguably is one of the best running backs, if not the best running back in the NFL. Um, but the shadow on Miami, because unfortunately Ryan Tannehill isn't going to be playing. He's been ruled out. Matt Moore is going to play. He's not played awful, but he is no Ryan Tannehill. And I really think that Pittsburgh carries this at home. But before I turn it over to you, Raj, Adam Gase has a really, really good history against the Steelers. When he was with the Broncos, I believe the Steelers never defeated the Broncos. He beat them this year. And it was convincing, albeit, of course, Ben Roethlisberger getting hurt. But before he got hurt, he really wasn't doing that well. And I know that because I had him on fantasy that week. So I really think that Miami has a shot because of Adam Gase. But I really think the home field advantage in playoffs and the experience is what's going to carry Big Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers over. What do you think? What's your take on this?
I mean, yeah, you're not kidding. Experience is a key. I mean, when you have a guy who's won 2 Super Bowls and has been to playoffs so many times, he knows a thing or two about playoffs. So you can expect him to be, kind of treated as a normal game and not worry too much about the hype. But I mean, I was just looking at the weather, and it's supposed to be around 20 degrees, and I think when you have that. When weather's, I think that's going to be a factor. The wind's showing to be like 10 miles. So it looks like, for now, Le'Veon Bell is getting. I think he's been rushing as well as anybody. And when you have a running back like that, and when you have a big playmaker, Antonio Brown, you can only. And with the experience of Big Ben, I think they have a really good shot of winning this. But as you mentioned, Adam Gase has been doing well, and they do have a big time playmaker in Jarvis Landry. So I wouldn't rule them out. But I think when you said earlier that they can't rely on defenses, I think Steelers will have to rely on their defense a little bit to limit the big plays that Jarvis Landry can make and Kenny Stills can make. So in that regard, I think if Dolphins are not able to get a couple big plays out of this game and go for touchdowns, I think Steelers will win this convincingly. But at the same time, you can't ignore the fact that they have one of the best receivers. Even though he doesn't get a lot of the hype that someone like Odell Beckham gets, he still is as fast as anybody. And he can make, it's like being down 14-0, but then this guy makes an 80-yarder, a touchdown run, and you can't, the game is back to being, it's up for grabs now. So you can't ignore that. But that's why I think Steelers secondary will have to step up because they do have some good receivers. Now, we'll see whether or not Matt Moore can exploit that, but I don't think the Steelers secondary is going to be comfortable come Saturday. And I really think that it should be a close game till like the fourth quarter. Then maybe Big Ben just sneaks it out and they win convincingly in the fourth quarter. But I think it'll be a tough game for Big Ben to just basically cruise through.
And I think this is going to be a battle of the offensive lines for rushing yards as well, because Miami has a good front with Cameron Wake and Ndamukong Suh, and Steelers, while Stephon Tuitt really shows up, that unit it's very competent, but there really isn't a superstar there, unlike Miami with Sue. But they really do a job, and I think that Miami's offensive line doesn't get enough credit at times. Jay Ajayi, he's had a great year, but Miami's offensive line, I don't think they have any Pro Bowlers, but they've played very competently, and I think they're a big reason why they finished 10-6, and possibly would have been better if Tannehill played. And Steelers offensive line, after that horrific 2009 season when they gave up 50 sacks or something, since Marquise Pouncey came in, and Gilbert on the right side of the line, they're excellent, and Le'Veon Bell just makes more out of a play than your average running back would. So I really think this is going to be a contrast to what we're going to see in the first AFC game on Saturday with Raiders Texans. It's going to be a great way to end Wildcard weekend. The games. I'm sorry, it's going to be a good way to start Sunday, the Wildcard game, because the Packer game is later on. But I really think this is going to be a great game. I'm gonna for my pick, I'm gonna give the Steelers by a field goal. I really think Adam Gase, coach of the year in my opinion. They were 1-4. They looked hapless. They looked awful. They really looked like a team with no bearings. The Patriots were looking like, they were gonna absolutely cruise through the division, which they did, but it looks respectable now with the Dolphins coming up second with the winning record. So I really think it's going to be a field goal, and not to like put myself ahead too much, but I really think the Dolphins next year, if they draft well, there really could be something. Not saying that they're going to beat the Patriots. That's Bill Belichick always finds a way. We'll get into that later, but let's finish this pick. Raj, who are you picking?
Well, I'm going to go with the Steelers, and for all the reasons that I said. But I think, like I said earlier, Texas game will be pretty convincing in the fourth. But I think this game will come down to the wire. I can't see, I can't see the Steelers just sailing through and just basically getting the job done before the last 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. I think it will come down to one possession game, and I think it might just be Steelers offense that goes down and scores either a field goal or a touchdown. But I think I'll take them by a touchdown, and that just means that two home teams will end up winning if our predictions go well.
Yep, and home field advantage is huge in playoffs, and the Pittsburgh crowd always gets into it. Very loyal fans, and they're used to that playoff atmosphere. Yeah, all right. So that wraps it up for the AFC, and the AFC has a bit of a contrast, as we said. One game, an offensive shootout, as we potentially see, in a defensive battle in the second one. The NFC matchups are much more intriguing. And we're going to start off first with the Lions at the Seattle Seahawks on the 7th of January at 8:15 p.m. on NBC on Saturday, that is. And this is a fascinating matchup, Raj, in my opinion. And why I'll say is because we don't know which team is going to show up for both of these. Are we going to see the Lions, which, lost to the Giants, lost to the Packers, or are we going to see the Lions that came back in the fourth quarter and demolished teams, just destroyed them? Like, they destroyed Minnesota in the fourth quarter with Matthew Stafford coming red hot. Are we going to see the Seahawks that beat New England at New England, which, by the way, doesn't happen all that often? Or are we going to see the Seahawks that got destroyed by the Packers? It's a fascinating matchup, and I really think we should spend time on this to analyze this. So what's your take on this matchup?
Well, first of all, I don't think that the Seahawks that showed up at Lambeau will show up. This team is built for playoffs, and for the past 3-4 years, they've constantly been in the playoffs and done well. And it's not like they got eliminated the first game. I don't think they did. So I mean, this is another game where the weather is going to be a factor. But I do think that I don't expect the Seahawks that were at Lambeau to show up, and I don't think the Lions will be, looking like they looked last week. So, this is the playoffs. I mean, you don't get another chance. So I think the teams will have their, best game plan that they've had all season, and the players will be ready to go. Even if they're hurt a little bit, they'll just, they'll just want to play the game because, you win three or four games and you win the Super Bowl. So you do want to play each game the hardest you can. And for me, Seahawks are, they have an advantage in coaching staff. They have an advantage in the defensive side of the ball. I mean, we all know that Earl Thomas got hurt, but I think the Seahawks defense is still should be, is one of the more respectable ones. And I think they might even just be top 5 defense. So, I mean, but you're right. Lions, they can definitely look way better than they looked last week. If the good Lions show up, then obviously it will be a lot closer game. But one of the things that I don't like about this matchup is the fact that Lions doesn't have a running game. I know they've been running the guy, that new guy,
Zach Zenner.
Right, yeah, they've been running him quite a bit, but when you face a defense like Seahawks, you need someone who's run the ball before and who can run it tough, and we have yet to see that from Zach Center. So for me, that's a huge disadvantage. I don't know how Seahawks running back committee looks right now, but I think Thomas Rawls is the one who's leading the charge, and I trust. The fact of the matter is it's going to rain. And, I mean, not fact, but it's predicted that it's going to rain, and with that in mind, it's hard to throw the ball first of all, and that's where Lions have an advantage over the Seahawks. They have a better receiving core, not by too much, but they still have more playmakers on their team than the Seahawks do. At the same time, their defensive, I think the same can be said about their defense. I mean, if their defense really shows up like they have been in the regular season when they were on that win streak, they can really contain Russell Wilson. I think they have the linemen that can rush the passer and just contain him in the pocket. If they can do that, and if Zach Center somehow manages to run a 100-yard game, I think Lions have a real shot. But I think other than that, if Seahawks just come out and they play like they've been playing the past 2 years in the playoffs, then you can't really expect Lions, who did get eliminated by the Cowboys last 2 seasons ago, and have always struggled to make playoffs under Jim Caldwell. You can't expect them to just come out and hand it to the Seahawks. So with that in mind, I think Seahawks are the better team of the two, especially in the playoffs. But plus, they got a home field advantage. I mean, their fans are probably the loudest fans in the NFL. So that helps your defense, So with that, I guess Lions are not too shabby, but I'll give Seahawks the upper hand.
Well, I think the Lions have, the loss against Dallas, both this season and in the playoffs. I think Matthew Stafford has grown from those losses, and it's weird to say. I know that he's grown from those losses, but he's become a better player since he last played Dallas in the playoffs. He was playing at an MVP level until, unfortunately, I think he had a fracture in his throwing middle finger, the right hand. That's awful. For a quarterback, whether it be Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, anyone. You break your finger, you're not going to be the same. And, unfortunately, it's affected them. And you're right that the lack of a run game, Theoretic going down really, really, really caused problems because Matthew Stafford and Theoretic had that connection. Theoretic would get about 100 scrimmage yards a game with his receiving and crucial third down conversions. They don't have that anymore. But I still like the Lions in this matchup because I really don't think Seattle is Seattle anymore. I really think that Pete Carroll has too much of a laissez-faire approach to coaching. He lets players be themselves, and that leads to Michael Bennett talking too much. That leads to Richard Sherman, causing problems with his offensive coordinator, which he has no business in, telling reporters that he's going to ruin their careers, being a distraction. These larger-than-life personalities, which you don't need in a locker room, causing problems, causing issues. And I think Frank Clark and Jerron Reed, the rookie from Alabama, they got into a fight after Jerron Reed got ejected. And a team that that sort of gets into these sorts of fights, and Pete Carroll sort of says, "Oh, I'm going to let the players be themselves." Well, yeah, you let them be themselves. They're just going to play for themselves. They're not going to play as a team, which is a shift from the Seattle identity that we saw when they beat the Denver Broncos so well. Was that they were a team as on defense. They were a team. It's become more individualistic. It's become more, there's more of a tension, I feel, in Seattle. And I think the opposite is in Detroit. I think Detroit is much closer as a team. They on offense, they definitely look up to Matt Stafford as a leader. On defense, they're a little fragmented, but Ziggy Ansah's great. They have Ashawn Robinson, who's really good. They have Darius Slay. I really think they made a mistake letting go of Issa Abdul-Quddus. Darius Slay's pretty good. Glover Quinn's pretty good. DeAndre Levy's pretty good. I honestly believe, and I will pick the Detroit Lions in this matchup because of the fact that they're going to work harder and work better as a team than Seattle will. Seattle has all the advantages, as you said. They're playing at CenturyLink. Their fans are loud. It's going to run. They're going to have a running game. But I really think Detroit has a chance of pulling this out of the hat. What do you think?
Well, I mean, based on the points you made about the team chemistry, I think that's something you kind of get with the losing. That comes with all the losses that you've had. They lost to Green Bay pretty badly.
Mm.
They haven't been playing too well. So I think a lot of these stories, they could be inflated a little bit. I haven't read into them at all, but I don't think any of that affects them. And I think a lot of the personalities that you just talked about, they've been the same even when they won the Super Bowl. You can argue that it wasn't, but I think it was. It just wasn't as public. And yeah, I mean, a DB doesn't have any business, telling the offensive coordinator what to do or publicly criticizing him. But I believe, they'll be ready to go. I mean, as you said, I mean, if they're being selfish, if each player is trying to be selfish, one of the biggest things, probably one of the only goals that they have in their mind, each player is getting a ring, and this is their chance. They win 3 games, they'll be in the Super Bowl. I mean, so they'll be ready to go. I don't doubt for a second that anything that's happened up until now off the field will be that much of a distraction to limit them, in this game. But I agree with you. I think Stafford is playing really well, and Jim Caldwell really has his team together in terms of players being close. But it comes down to 60 minutes, and whichever team plays better is probably going to win. And Seahawks, they have a record of playing well in the playoffs, so I'll go with them. I think they'll have to tough. I mean, this is not going to be easy for them. Lions won't hand it to them like they did last week to Detroit. I mean, to Packers. But this is a game that has Seahawks written all over it. So I'm going to go with Seahawks and Seattle and have them, like maybe even win with a couple touchdowns, a couple field goals. So what is that, 20-17? It will be a close game. I think this will be the lowest. Oh, actually, no. Texans, I think, will be the lowest scoring game. But I think this would be a lot lower than people had expected in terms of scoring. And weather has something to do with it, but I think this won't be a shootout at all.
No, I agree 100%. I'm just going to end this by saying I believe it's going to be Detroit by a field goal. And
so we're on the opposite. Okay.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens come Saturday.
Let's see, man. Matt Prater.
Right. Matt Prater with that 62-yarder saving Tebow.
Not in the rain. Not in the rain. You can't do that in the rain.
Yeah, and windy. Seattle is not a place that there's it's not a cool. It's definitely windy there.
Just to make the last point, they're not playing in a dome like they're used to playing into. So
true.
I don't really. I'm not buying into the fact that weather doesn't have any effect when it comes to like if you've been playing in dome all year, at least 8 games out of 16, I think that affects. And their last game was in the dome as well. So this will be a new kind of, the whole new scenario for them.
Oh,
and they'll have to adjust. I mean, if they're able to adjust, and they'll be the winners. But we'll see.
Yeah, but I'm still taking the underdog in this one, the Detroit Lions, by a field goal, and you're taking Seahawks by a field goal. Okay, all right, and and we're gonna move on to the most hyped matchup of Wildcard Weekend, which is the New York Giants at the Green Bay Packers at Lambeau Field. It's gonna be, I believe, on Sunday at 4:40 p.m. Gonna be at 3:40 p.m. Central Time, and I'm gonna start off with the weather here. It's apparently supposed to be 0 degrees at Lambeau Field. Supposed to be 0 degrees, and when it's 0 degrees, it possibly is going to be a lot worse with wind chills. So one can imagine that this is going to be something that's going to play a huge factor in the game. And I really think that this is going to be a tough running game. Tough running game versus running game between the teams, and I think that the Giants have the edge currently on the running game. And I believe so because the running game has been getting better. And I don't think it's because their offensive line is any better. Their offensive line, Eric Flowers, I think he's terrible. I also think Richburg is pretty good. But honestly, I don't think the line is a strength. I think it's because Paul Perkins, he can find a hole. He can go. Green Bay's defensive line without B.J. Raji hasn't been the same. when they bottled up Adrian Peterson, I believe, last year for 37 yards. And when Adrian Peterson had a great year last year, he was the rushing leader. I really think that the running game wise, and you know, I really think that the Packers aren't using the running backs as well as they can. I really think that Ty Montgomery and Christian Michael could be a lot more of a more potent running back committee if even Ty Montgomery were catching a little bit off the backfield, which they don't. Um, I think this game is going to be a lot on the running game, but we can't miss out on the receivers, and we have potentially two of the best receivers this year in the NFC, and Odell Beckham and Jordy Nelson going head to head. And Odell Beckham had 101 catches for 1,367 yards and 10 touchdowns, while Jordy Nelson, not too far behind, 97 catches, 1,257 yards, and 14 touchdowns. It's been a renaissance year for Jordy Nelson, who, in my opinion, should be the comeback player of the year. It's going to be a fantastic game, Raj. What do you think of it?
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. This is probably the most interesting matchup, out of the 4 games. I know we got Big Ben, but I think that whenever you got 2, big-time quarterbacks, you just want to watch that game. Even though you said, it'll probably rely on the running game a little bit, I think there will be more screen passes you'll see from both teams, especially Packers, since they have a receiver/running back in Ty Montgomery. That will happen. I think you can expect about, screen passes, possession, stuff like that. But like you say, it's probably the best matchup on Sunday, and both teams have a history of being in the playoffs, facing each other, and it's usually Eli who comes on top. But Aaron Rodgers has been playing as well as anybody. I think he's the potential MVP. I mean, had he started running the table a game sooner, I think you could easily put him, in a hot conversation for MVP. But not to go over to Matt Ryan or anything, but right now Matt Ryan is getting talked about a lot more than Aaron Rodgers because he's been consistent. And I think Aaron Rodgers started his campaign a little later. But to go back to this game, you're right. Perkins is going to have to shine. Justin Pugh coming back is also helping the Giants. You're right. Flowers is terrible, when it comes to run blocking, even pass blocking. He's been a little better at pass blocking than he's been in the past, but yeah, absolutely. They're going to have to run inside. They're going to have to run through the guards if Giants want to have any success. I don't know too much about the Packers' offensive line, but I think Ty Montgomery looked pretty good running in the last few games. Even Christian Michael looked a little better, except for the last game. I didn't see a lot of splash plays from him. But, I think Christian Michael is one of those players that I don't trust. And I say that, because he's not reliable. I think whenever – like the minute I started thinking about this game, I thought, Christian Michael is one of those players who might fumble the ball. I think I feel that coming. I think this game is going to have more turnovers than the other 3 games not combined, but it's just going to have more turnovers than the other 3 games. Fumbles. The weather is, like you said, 0 degrees, so it's not going to be easy to throw the ball. It's not going to be easy to run the ball, and obviously it's not going to be easy to tackle as well. Because you're playing in 0 degrees, but. This will be a game I think you can see about a couple turnovers before the half, before they start figuring things out from each side. I mean, that's what I would expect, especially because it's the playoffs. And one of the things that I wanted to mention was the fact that Eli has played at Lambeau in playoffs. And surprisingly, I don't know the stats, but he looked pretty darn good throwing the ball I think it was 2011. It could have been both times, but I think it was a year with David Tyree in it. So I remember that. It's got to be 2006.
2007.
Right.
Yeah.
And he had, he was putting the ball on the money. So if that guy shows up, Aaron Rodgers is going to have to match him. I mean, if there's, let's say, they run the ball first down, second down. If it started in 5, I expect Eli to make those throws. And if you can get Eli to, do 3rd and 10, 3rd and 15, they definitely, can get him rattled a little bit. But Eli is a different animal in the playoffs, and I think the same can be said about Rodgers. But Eli's playing with a better defense, and that could help him a lot. He's playing with a more established running back. At least he's been doing he's been consistent, Perkins, in the last few games.
Mhm.
Not last few, but the better half of the season, I think. Good enough to get
Mhm.
Rashad Jennings benched and be the second back. So in that regard, I think Eli and Giants have the advantage on the overall side of the things because they have the defense better. They have the better defense, but I do expect the Green Bay crowd to get into it and get in Eli's head. And if Packers can turn up the blitz a little bit and get Eli uncomfortable when it's third down and long, you can see a couple of interceptions come your way. But at the same time, Packers defense hasn't been able to get it done. So it's actually kind of weak versus the weak. I mean, Giants offense is not necessarily the weak link of the team, but they definitely haven't reached or met the expectations. With Shepard and Odell, and
Yeah,
Eli. And
and speaking of Sterling Shepard and OBJ, what do you think of them, going to Miami and partying and what do you think of that? Because I think we're talking about Eli. Eli can throw it on the money. He can throw a dime. But what if Odell, Sterling Shepard, and Jarrell Adams and Victor Cruz? What if they're not on their game? What if they're for whatever reason not in it? What do you think of that? What do you think that partying is going to have an issue and make Eli, not look like playoff Eli, even though he might play like playoff Eli? What do you think of that?
well, I personally believe the receivers are going to be just fine, and I think Odell might. He's been bringing his game, but I think he'll step up big time. But I think what they did and then on their day off will probably be talked about a lot more than it should be if they lose the game. I think it depends on whether they win or lose. If they
Mm-hmm.
win, people will put that behind, like we saw in 2007, I believe. When Romo went to on vacation during his bye week, we saw the fact that media can really get on you for losing the game. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll only be a factor if they lose. It'll get talked about for a couple of weeks and then it'll die down. But I don't think I personally don't think it has anything to do with it. I mean, they're grown men. They get their day off. I mean, if I were on my Saturday, if I'm whatever I do on my day off, it's really my business, and not. So I think in that regard, it's fine. Um, but if their game does get impacted or affected, I think you'll see uh, the coaching staff get frustrated, and you'll see that media really will get on them. I think, but I really don't see that to be an issue.
Mm-hmm. I it's you make some very valid points, and um, I really think that this game is going to be defined by how the Green Bay defense plays. And, Dom Capers, he's been there a long time. I really think that the Packer defense underperforms in terms of its personnel. They have some tremendously talented personnel. Unlike, I think it's the complete opposite of the New England Patriots. Um, England doesn't have, say, well, they now have Dante Hightower and Devin McCourty, but their defensive line is just filled with not very prominent players, but they're really good at stopping the run. You don't see crazy runs coming out of New England's defensive line. Well, in fact, the Green Bay defensive line has some really talented players, but Dom Capers can't. The defensive coordinator, he really can't get the best out of them. And he did really, he called a decent game against Detroit. Um, I really think that it's going to come down to how the Packer defense plays. If the Packer defense, Hocklin Dix is a Pro Bowler. I really think Morgan Burnett also played like a Pro Bowler, but you can only have so many safeties go to the Pro Bowl, and there are other safeties who also played fantastically. But I really think that if the Giants discover a running game between the guards, as you said, with Paul Perkins or Rashad Jennings getting, those tough 4 or 5 yards in the first downs,
Mhm.
it's gonna be one of those where the Packers definitely gonna have to match and score, and it's gonna be difficult in 0 degree weather, man. I'll tell you that for sure. Even though we haven't had 0 degree weather here in the Northeast this year as of yet. But hey, it's Wisconsin. It's playoff football. It's going to be a great game. Um, I'm going to say that it's going to be very close. I really it's really difficult for me to call this. I really think it's going to come down to a field goal. Kicking game is going to be crucial. Robbie Gould has experience. He played for Chicago. He is experienced kicking in Lambeau, so he's good. Tim Mastay, sorry, not Tim Mastay, Mason Crosby. I believe he's been making these recent field goals. So I'm gonna go with Green Bay by a field goal because of home field advantage. But I really think it can turn right away um, into the Giants' hands if the Packer defense, doesn't capitalize on a chance for an interception. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I'll give out my prediction first. I think Giants will get this out, get this win, and a lot of reasons that I think Giants will win. One of them is just the quarterback. I mean, you got the quarterback who's been there before, who's done it before, and who has a tendency of getting hot in playoffs. So, not to say that Aaron Rodgers can't match that by every mean. By all the means he could. But what I'm trying to say is Eli has the history that you want to see. I mean, it's basically the same path that they took in 2006. You go through Green Bay, you beat the next team, and you get to the Super Bowl and you beat the Patriots. And I think this team is better than the teams that he may have played on. Now, I don't think the coach, Ben McAdoo, is good enough, as good as Tom Coughlin, but at the same time, Ben McAdoo, he's been figuring things out. He has he's won 10 games. But I think the biggest stat is, can they contain? I mean, Packers won 6 games in a row. They're the red-hot team in the NFC. I don't think any team is hotter than the Packers right now, especially when it comes to offense. So the question is, can they contain Rodgers and the entire offense? I think they can. They have the defense. I mean, they spent a lot of money. They spent about $100 million this offseason. So I expect that defense to show up like it has been in the past. I think the entire season. They may have started a little bit slower than you would expect it, but they've showed up. They've shown up and they're doing well. So I think Eli and the Giants will take this win. They'll even win by a touchdown. I think they'll win pretty convincingly in the last few minutes of the fourth quarter, and I think the game will stay close till the half of the fourth quarter. Till there's like 5 minutes left in the fourth. But Eli will snatch it out, I think, by a touchdown, and that's my prediction. About like 20. I would give it 28-21. I think 4 to 3 touchdowns. I don't see any field goal. That's just me, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's funny. We're agreeing on the AFC results, but we're going the different route on the NFC results, and maybe it's because the NFC matchups are much more intriguing.
They are intriguing, and the fact that you're a Packers fan, I think I can see clearly that Giants do have the upper end. Look, Packers are not an underdog, right? But they still have to face a 2-time MVP Super Bowl champion Eli, and that really good defense that can cover. The biggest thing is they can cover, and we've been seeing that the Packers receivers are getting open a lot more than they did last year, or even the first half of the season. So I expect Giants defense to cover them and just cover them well. And I also expect the linemen. I think they'll even have a spy on Rodgers and Casillas. But I do expect the line to do well and rush the pocket real good because they have been doing it. I don't know if JPP is back, but I do expect.
No, JPP. He says he's expecting, if the Giants make it, to come back to the NFC Championship game.
Right. So we have seen Okwara, whatever his name is. He's done a good job replacing him, but I think Vernon and Damon Harrison in the line, they have a real good shot of pressure in the quarterback. I think Harrison, he should have been a Pro Bowler, but that's for another topic. But he does
definitely
do a lot of things. Yeah, he's a real good tackle and probably top 5 in the league. And you got Vernon. He can rush. I mean, you need someone who needs to go get the quarterback. That's him. And yeah, they can cover in Janoris Jenkins, Apple, and Landon Collins has been playing pretty well. And Dominic DRC, and I think he had 2 interceptions last game against the Redskins, and came at key timing. So I think they're gonna cover. So the biggest thing is, can the Packers still score on them? And I don't think they can. Maybe, you know what? I actually could even go back to my predictions. I don't think they can go up and just score 3 touchdowns on them. But we'll see. For now, I have done like 28-21, but I don't think it's going to be easy for them to just go down the field 3 times in a row, or 3 times during the game and just score on them. But I expect this to be a little higher scoring than the Lions game. Should be interesting, but I do think Eli will, he will start as a path to Super Bowl. We'll see.
Yeah, it's almost like the Giants have Linval Joseph back in Damon Harrison.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like that. Linval Joseph, they're probably, and Damon Harrison, they're similar run stuffers. I think Giants are going for that 2011 formula again, and it definitely, there's a sense of deja vu around the Giants. But I think the one stat that hasn't been talked about is that there are only 2 Giants from that run left in the team. That is Victor Cruz and obviously Eli Manning. Now, the Packers, they aren't that much. They don't have that much in their one. They have T.J. Lang, Clay Matthews, and Aaron Rodgers, obviously. I believe a couple more, maybe Morgan Burnett. Actually, I don't think
Jordy there.
Jordy Nelson, yes. So the Packers have more experience in that compared to the Giants. But hey, at the same time, this is all talk and this is all plays until when you hit the play, at 0-degree weather in Lambeau Field with a raucous crowd. That's where the real play comes in. So.
Yeah.
It's analysis only goes so much, stats only go so much, experience only counts so much. It's definitely going to be big, but there's a big deja vu feeling, and I believe the winner of this game probably plays. Actually, no, we're not sure yet because the Packers are.
There was a scenario. I think more likely is Packers playing. Whoever wins this game. We'll probably play the Cowboys, but I think it does depend on how the Seahawks get. I think if the Lions were to win,
the Lions are the 6th seed. The Seahawks are the 3rd seed. So the Seahawks, if they win, will play the Falcons, and then whoever. So we'll know by Saturday.
If the Lions win, they'll play the Cowboys. I think because they're the last seed. Okay.
Correct. So that game is basically going to define the divisional matches, which is something we'll have in our next podcast.
Right. I just want to quickly, I want to go back to your point about, when it comes to Lambeau and, the crowd and the noise, all the analysis is out of the window. And I agree with that. I think it's 0-0. It's a new season for these teams. It's like that saying goes, every dog has its own day. Whatever team manages to get the best out of themselves during that 60-minute period, I think they'll be the winners. And we'll see how that goes. That's what Eli's been able to do the past 2 runs that he had. He got hot at the right time, and that's what you're looking for. If the Packers get hot, if they contain Eli and they don't let him get hot like he did the last 2 times, even in cold weather, they're probably going to end up winning. But it's 0-0 now. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm. It's a 1-game season from now on for every week. It's Got to win. You gotta move. If you don't win, go home. That's the end of it. It's knockout football. It's playoff football. It's sudden death, as they say in soccer. So, hey, it should be a great weekend of football, and really glad that we got this going right in time for playoff football. We have our predictions in there. We really hope you enjoy the football that's going to come up. Maybe some games more than others, but hey, it's football. Season's winding down. New season isn't going to be here until September, so hey, make sure you enjoy the game. And I think that's
August for Tony Romo. It's August.
Well, it's preseason, and then there's real football.
Get hurt again.
Well, there's real football starting in September, and there's preseason, which is the Hall of Fame game. Who knows what's going to happen there after the fiasco this year? But hey, who knows? It's going to be a great couple weeks of football left for us, and make sure to enjoy them. I think we're going to end on that. Right, Raj? You got anything else to say?
No, this is the most exciting, time in football. So
absolutely,
we'll end with that. Yeah,
absolutely. All right. Thanks for listening. And we'll come back to you next week with hopefully divisional matchups and some analysis of how the wildcard weekend went. So yeah, have a great weekend. Enjoy the matchups. Take care, y'all.